thank you very much. Thank you very much all for coming. It's really good to see a few new faces as well. So my name is Peter Armitage. I'm one of the co-presidents of GreenBRIDGE at the moment. Oh, sorry, so yeah, it's really nice to see some new people here. So yeah, please do come and introduce yourself afterwards, either me or to Aaron Giudic, who's the other co-president this year. So yeah, today we're really pleased to have Dr. Scott Kelly, who's ex-GreenBRIDGE committee from a while back, one of the founding members. Yeah, so going back a few years now, but he's currently working at 4CMR, which is the, you might have to help me with the 4Cs.
Cambridge Centre for Climate Change and Mitigation Research.
That's the one, yeah. So he's currently a research associate working with Professor Doug Crawford, one of our advisors as well. So just before we start, I'd like to just say a little bit about the series that we're doing at the moment and why we're doing these different topics on looking at energy efficient retrofit in particular. It all links back to our main summer event this year, which is our Sustainable Retrofit Challenge 2013, which is it's the first time we've done something like this. And we're doing this with the Estates Department, with the Living Laboratory for Sustainability, which is a new part of the Estates Department, and they are working to improve the sustainability of the university estate, looking at 5 buildings in particular this year as part of a pilot study. And so we with them have been gathering data on this building, which is the chemistry department, and we've been asking teams to enter. I do have a few people here from some of those teams. Fantastic. Yes, and so we've got some teams from Cambridge, and then also a number of other teams from other universities around the UK. There are actually still a couple more places, but we'd like to get a couple more Cambridge teams if possible. So if there's anyone here who isn't part of the team and would like to be, there is still a chance to do it, although we have been running for a few weeks now. Right, so last seminar we had was looking in particular at heritage and planning. So we had looking at two case studies. One was Newcourt and Trinity College and all the heritage and design issues there. And then there was another case study from building a house owned by Grosvenor Property down in London, and looking at the other heritage issues there. Today we're broadly looking at green building technologies. However, rather than just do a rundown, do a list of going through insulation and other things like that, and just rehashing all the many textbooks and websites that are out there, we decided to go on a slightly different route today. And the two talks that we're having, firstly we'll have Scott talking about the Green Deal, which is looking at how the government is assessing retrofit technologies for both domestic and non-domestic buildings and the current policy context. And then I'll be talking about green building technologies in practice. So going through a number of different types of green building technologies and using case studies from the Technology Strategy Board's ongoing building performance evaluation project, which I've done a report on recently, which will discuss some of the common issues that arise with these kind of innovative technologies and some of their common pitfalls and perhaps ways of avoiding them. So just briefly, though, just talk very quickly about green building technologies. So, in assessing the technologies, we still think that the best way of doing it is this lean, clean, and green method. So, starting with your baseline whole site, you start looking at the energy efficiency measures first, and how you can improve the efficiency of the systems on site. Then clean technologies, so clean and low carbon technologies such as CHP or combined cooling and power. And then finally the green technologies, where you're reducing your emissions by producing energy on site. And this is something that we actually saw last week as well. So this is just a little bit of this is data from the Newcourt site, where Oliver Smith from Fifth Studio was demonstrating how the design aspiration for Newcourt was to reduce the emissions by almost 90%, starting with the demand reduction and improving efficiency, but then also having to learn zero carbon technologies such as heat pumps and PV. And this is just this is a part of the small analysis that I was working on previously from display energy certificates. One of the things which comes along with a display energy certificate is an advisory report which gives a number of recommendations. And this is simply an analysis of the most common recommendations for higher education buildings. And we see the usual kind of suspects here, so lighting, fabric maintenance actually is surprisingly common. But then also the more standard kind of insulation and PV and solar water. I'm sorry, the word in the brackets, that's approximately the payback period for each of those things. So then finally, just to say, for the Sustainable Retrofit Challenge, we're adding a lot more information onto the GreenBRIDGE website. So we started adding the seminars, the videos and the slides from last week, so now available online, and we'll be updating the website with other useful documents and websites all about energy efficient retrofit. Some more contextual information, so for example the energy data which we've not managed to get from the site, and some other lecture courses looking at green building technologies. So that's all going to go up on our main website. I'll send around links later to anyone who's interested. So now I would like to pass over to Scott to talk about the Green Deal. So, yeah.
Just out of curiosity, how long do I have?
We've got until 3:30, but we don't necessarily have to use our time. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Did you want to talk after me again, or
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So at least as long as I leave you like 15 minutes or something.
something like that.
Okay. Awesome. So some of you know me. I'm Scott Kelly. I'm one of the founding members of GreenBRIDGE. Me and Tatiana started the society through a grant from Crash many years ago. I stayed doing it for a couple of years and then decided to finish my PhD and get on with things. And it's good to see that it's still going strong, and the committee's been handed down through multiple generations of people interested and keen on developing the built environment. A lot of the material today from this presentation I delivered a week ago to Cambridge Clean Tech, where I gave a presentation to businesses essentially. I've kind of adapted it a little bit because they really wanted to focus more on business models and how they could potentially make money from the Green Deal and where the Green Deal barriers were. Today, I can talk about that if you're interested, and we'll go into some of that detail, but mostly I'll be talking about the potential for carbon reduction and more of the, which I think more interesting, barriers to the Green Deal. To start the presentation, I'm going to go over some of the final conclusions from my PhD, because it is a good starting point, I think, to show, look at the transition of energy efficiency technologies and what's required and how much energy savings the UK can actually achieve through energy efficiency measures within the building stock. For my PhD, I developed a model, a building stock model, that's able to incorporate both behavioural elements and the technological elements, the physical building properties for the UK domestic sector, and then what technologies can be implemented, realistic technologies can be implemented over the next 50 years, and the energy efficiency savings that come from that. So we all know about the background. Energy consumption and emissions are an important driver, and we have some serious targets to meet. 80% by 2050 is the key one that's always quoted, and we won't get there unless we start focusing on the built environment. And over 40% of energy is consumed within the built environment. Both the IPCC and the IEA have both recognised this, and whereas the IPCC say if energy efficiency does not lead to a decrease in fossil fuel demand, the chance of achieving IPCC's most relaxed CO2 mitigation scenario will be unlikely. And from the IEA, they claim that 34% of all emission reductions must come from the built environment. So there's some serious savings that need to be made here, and particularly in developed countries where that's going to involve retrofitting the existing building stock. So we also know that there are many drivers for energy and emissions from the built environment. These are the three, I think, that you can categorise these into three broad areas. We have the physical properties of the building and energy efficiency, the heat loss through the building fabric, and also the efficiency of technologies within the building. So that's the appliances, the boilers, etc. Of course, occupants are a big part of this as well. We now know that at least 50% of the variance within a home, independent of technologies, can be down to just human behaviour and social demographic factors alone. I think it's important to separate these two things because social demographics is also very important depending on your culture, depending on how many people live in a home, depending on your income. Of course they're related, but you can get some interesting insights just by identifying social demographics, which is more easily quantifiable than something like human behaviour. And this is what I've done in my PhD. And of course, the third factor, the environment, where we need to consider external temperatures, but not only the extremes, but also how temperatures change over time, over a day, over the period of a day, because people heat their homes differently depending on whether you're going through a week-long cold spell or whether you're just having a cold nip in the afternoon. So it's also, I think, important to think about the dynamics of weather and temperature the house is going through. So this is what really drove my model that I built. I think one of the things that's often overlooked in energy efficiency until recently, but still we don't have enough momentum, are the many co-benefits from improving the energy efficiency from the building stock. So I've listed a number of opportunities here. So we have lower energy costs simply by implementing energy efficiency measures. We get a reduction in fuel poverty, which is a key government priority. Of course, and that leads to improved health impacts. People live in warmer, healthier homes that are less leaky. You get lower health impacts, so you're actually saving money on health bills. You get a diversification of energy supply. So if you have lowering carbon isn't just about improving the fabric efficiency, it's also about diversification of energy, implementing solar energy, solar thermal energy, generating energy on site. So by doing this, you're diversifying your supply and mitigating risks against external shocks, particularly in the fossil fuel sector. We get improved energy security by doing that. And importantly, we get to mitigate climate change, which has got its own set of costs associated with it. And if we think about how we renovate the building stock effectively, we can also at the same time think about adapting to climate change through flood defence barriers within the home, through waterproof buildings, through better designed windows, etc. So there's all these opportunities that, if you think about them from the outset, it just makes sense to start renovating and retrofitting the UK building stock. We also know these statistics, so this is just to show that a significant proportion of the energy consumed in the UK is for heat. And if we break that down by sector, a good chunk of that is from the domestic sector and the commercial sector. If we break that down, if we look at the domestic sector alone, we can see that the majority of this at the moment is supplied by natural gas, which is a carbon source and something that needs to change if we're going to meet that 80% target. So this is one of the outputs from my PhD. So what we see here is the transition between 2010 and 2050 of different energy efficiency technologies. So I identified 9 technologies, as you can see down on the right-hand side here. I used the portfolio approach, which means that once I implemented a particular technology, I then implemented another technology within that building, so that it's not, if you use the additive approach, you actually end up having a lot more savings than what you do, because each marginal technology actually contributes less to your energy reduction and emissions. So it's important to ensure that each technology that you add is additive. What we can see here is that from 2010 we have around 300 terawatt hours per year. This model assumes that each new building is going to be zero carbon over time, and the space heating, as you can see, kind of goes up, but this is because as buildings are demolished inefficient buildings are demolished. We have an increase in new buildings, because more new buildings, but because they're close to zero carbon, even though the definition isn't actually zero carbon, you still get a slight increase over time. Interesting thing here is the best technology is exterior walls improved. These are all, by the way, very hard targets. So these are reaching targets, and I would be surprised if we could meet these targets in the buildings that we have here. The technology, I haven't shown it here, but the technologies follow logistic S-curve penetration rates. So they're based on how those technologies will diffuse through the market over time, based on their cost, based on how easy they are to implement, and whether you can get complete saturation and the existing saturation level of that technology. So I've built functions for each of these different technologies and looked at how they saturate through the market over time, and this was the result of that modelling exercise. I think another important thing here is you can see that this is just for space heating at the moment, at around 2/3 of energy reduction. We can get 2/3 energy reduction just by putting in energy efficiency technologies, which says that we still need to think about where we're going to get the remaining third from. Sorry, question?
Yeah, you had 100% double glazing, 100% triple glazing on the...
Yeah. So I didn't put up the logistic S-curve, but what I've done in the model is I've said first you go to double glazing, and then as double glazing then gets replaced over time. So maybe at the moment it's cost effective to put in double glazing but not triple glazing, and then over time that double glazing gets replaced by triple glazing, and then what you see from the S-curve is it actually goes up and then down. It's interesting because one of the arguments I'm making in my thesis is that actually it's probably over the long run it's more cost effective just to go straight to triple glazing, but I think it's unlikely that people aren't even talking about triple glazing at the moment. People are only talking about double glazing. But I included it as a technology just because I think in order to meet the targets we need to start thinking about that level. And also this exterior walls improved to U value 0.3. Solid wall, cavity wall insulation doesn't meet this standard. In order to meet this 0.3, you're requiring either cladding on the external of walls, significant, or I think actually the only way you can do it is through insulation on the outside of the walls, or some new technology putting it on the inside of the walls, just because it's so much insulation that you need that it will take up too much floor space within the building. So these are really hard to reach targets. Even the air leakage of 1 metre, at the moment the average is 5 times that. So we're talking serious improvements to the existing standards. But even with all these standards being met, we're still finding that the energy demand isn't reducing that much.
From a technology standpoint, the 0.3 isn't difficult. It's a
100% triple glazing.
I mean, that's quite simple. We know how it's a simple
triple glazing you're talking about.
Yeah. And also exterior walls. I mean, if you go to Europe, it's done.
Yeah.
Like the outside of the building. It's not a complicated technology, but it's difficult to practice.
And it's also very, very expensive to implement as well. So exterior wall insulation is probably the most expensive of those technologies.
You've got your energy efficient boilers in the middle between a lot of insulation on it. Well, I mean, you've got loft insulation below it.
You mean the thickness of the...
No, I mean in the order of the leading.
Right.
Is that significant? I mean, you said that you do it in a particular order.
Right.
The energy efficient boilers is bang in the middle.
Where is it? Here.
It's green, yeah.
Okay, so I think what I've done here is I've done it by cost. So energy efficient lighting is the cheapest, loft insulation is the next cheapest, double glazing, hot water tank insulation, and then boilers, changing the floors, improving, and then all the way up to the most costly. So the point I'm trying to make with this one actually is if you look at total energy, so on the other one I was looking at space heating, if you look at total energy, this includes appliances and lighting as well, then actually the reduction you get from these technologies looks even less. So as you can see, it's increased by another 150, so 2/3 comes from heating, another 1/3 comes from lighting and appliances, and then when you add that in again, you've got a bigger chunk to make. So the obvious thing is, well, we need to decarbonise the electricity supply. So I've done that as a scenario, decarbonising the electricity supply for lights and appliances, and electric heating that's done through electric boilers and existing electric hot water heating. But what I've assumed is that space heating, if you heat your house with space heating at the moment through gas, then that stays the same. And then looked at the reduction over time, and you can see we do start to get some serious reductions for aggregate emissions, so there's all emissions, but again, we've still got a third of the emissions that we still need to get down, so we need to get down to about this level. And so my argument is the only way to get here is actually decarbonise the source of the heating, fossil fuel source, so we need to change from heating our homes with gas, because putting in energy efficiency technologies won't meet the targets. We need to think about replacing that either with electric heating systems or solar thermal or more efficient heat pumps. Yeah. So anyway, this is just a bit of background before I get onto the Green Deal. I guess this just shows it by type, by end service type. And although back here you see hot water and space heating is the dominant source, by 2050, once you've implemented those energy efficiency technologies and decarbonised the power sector, and you're still heating your house with natural gas, then you've still got a big chunk here that you need to reduce. So what is the government presently doing? There's a whole lot of different policies and instruments that the government has started to implement. We have feed-in tariffs, which we all know about, for photovoltaics. We have the renewables obligation, which has been around for a very long time. The renewable heat incentive, which is kicking in soon, although been talked about for a long time. And the Green Deal and the energy company obligation, which are two policies which are supposed to work together, although they can also be independent. But the question is this going to complete the puzzle? Is this going to allow us to reach the targets that we're looking to meet? Certainly when the Green Deal was first announced, when the coalition government took office, the former Energy Secretary, Chris Huhne, made this very bold statement: the Green Deal will be a revolution, the first scheme of its kind in the developed world, the most ambitious energy-saving plan ever put forward, a once-and-for-all refit that will make every home in Britain ready for a low-carbon future. So, obviously, it's a very grand statement, and as we all know, Chris Huhne was later convicted for lying and is now in jail. So, whether this is another one of his lies, we don't know. Wait to see. I think there is definitely some opportunities for the Green Deal, and I'll go through some of the potential of the Green Deal and what some of its pitfalls are. Just out of curiosity, how many people are familiar with the Green Deal and how it works? A couple of people. Okay, so I'll just go over it because there's a few people that don't know it. So firstly, how the Green Deal works is it's financed through your household energy bills. So it's linked to the meter of the house rather than through the person that owns the house. So if you buy and sell the house, then the Green Deal, the loan stays with the house. So that's an important part of this. How it works is you have an estimated annual energy bill prior to the Green Deal. You get Green Deal financing to put in energy efficiency technologies into your house. That of course lowers your energy costs, but then you need to repay through your domestic energy bills the Green Deal or the loan for those energy efficiency measures. And as long as these two things don't add up to be greater than the original estimated energy bill, then you will meet the golden rule. This is called the golden rule. So it means that you won't ever be paying more than what you were prior to the efficiency measures being put in. In practice, I'm not sure if this is going to be met, simply because lots of reasons, but I think the most important thing is that this is based on estimated annual energy, and I know through doing my research that estimated bills are very different to actual bills, and the error there, the variance and the uncertainty there is huge. The second thing is, if this is the case, then actually the number of efficiency measures that you can install in the home is limited significantly. And so there's a lot of arguments being put forward now by the business community that says you know, this is all well and good for putting in a little bit of loft insulation here and, you know, maybe some double glazing in some of the windows and maybe a new boiler, but for the type of reductions that we're talking about at the level of the UK to meet the targets, we're talking massive retrofits that are going to need whole house refurbishments, and unless we can invest in that, and a lot of those investments aren't going to meet this golden rule, then we're not going to meet the targets. So there's now policy talk about maybe providing some alternatives to the golden rule, maybe some subsidising, maybe some allowance for the golden rule not to be met in some special situations.
Profit allowance.
Sorry?
Profit allowance.
Profit allowance, haven't heard of that one.
Well, I mean, you take a renewable heat incentive or a feed-in tariff.
Yeah.
The cost of the equipment and the cost of installing the equipment will be X.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you wish to do so through an accredited scheme, it costs that will be 2X.
Okay.
In order to cover the guy's wages who is doing the sales, providing the kit and everything else. Many things will be economic, with the golden rule if they were installed by Joe Plumber, but they're not going to be economically installed by Pimlico plumbers subcontracting to Joe and taking their 50% cut with the green deals.
Exactly.
They're campaigning for a profit subsidy.
They probably are as well, yeah. So the reason that the Green Deal was implemented was to address some very important barriers of why people don't currently invest in energy efficiency measures, even though they financially make sense to do so. I'll talk a bit about that in a bit. At the moment, it looks like the maximum loan amount is around £10,000, which again, some people argue maybe this isn't sufficient. I've seen some estimates where the average cost of a house might be up around 15,000, 20,000 even more to meet the kind of efficiency reduction standards that are required. Some houses, of course, will be able to do it for a lot less than that, but some of the older houses, especially heritage buildings, it's going to be very expensive to make them more energy efficient. At the moment, the maximum loan period is about 25 years. To carry out the assessment of the property, they need energy assessors to come in and look at the characteristics, the physical characteristics of the home, and enter that into an energy assessment tool, which is based on SAP, unfortunately. But this is going to cost around £120 to do that, and when I think it's not clear whether this cost is going to be borne by the household, which if it is, then there's another barrier, like the household has to come up with £120 to actually go forward with the scheme. Or is this cost going to be borne by the Green Deal provider as a kind of a way to get into the house and be offered the first right to put in the energy efficiency measures? And I'd probably argue that that's probably how the system will evolve. So the Green Deal providers will say, I'll give you a free assessment if you consider my options, my energy efficiency deal first before anyone else. At the moment, the interest rates are set around the 7 to 8% mark. Some people say this is too high, and the businesses, of course, are saying it's not enough. So there's some debate going on there, but I think this again represents an important policy lever that the government, if the Green Deal doesn't get taken up as expected over time, then the government has opportunity to change this rate here to make it more palatable for householders to actually invest in the technology. So there's a barrier, we have barriers, we have climate change targets and demand reduction. So what does the Green Deal try and do? It tries to get around the upfront capital costs. So because you're not paying for the cost of the energy efficiency technology in its entirety upfront, you're paying for it through your energy bills over time. You don't have to pay the capital costs, which is seen as a big barrier to investment. Gets around the split incentive problem, which is between the tenant and the landlord. So if you're a landlord, you're not going to be incentivized to make the building more energy efficient because you're not the one that's paying the energy bills. Your tenant is. So, and the same goes for the tenant. Why would you invest in energy efficiency measures in someone else's house and you are only going to be living there for a short period of time? You're not going to get the full benefit. So it's supposed to remove these two major barriers for putting in energy efficiency. The payback period isn't such an issue anymore because it's the loan amount stays with the property and stays with the property over a long time. So if you're thinking of moving out of your house in 10 years, you're not going to say, well, I need to have the payback period in 10 years because it doesn't matter anymore because it stays with the property. So some people, it's supposed to remove the hassle factor. So if you get a Green Deal assessor coming in to implement a whole lot of technologies at the same time, then you get a whole house retrofit. So it's supposed to remove some of this hassle of doing piecemeal things over a long period of time. Not exactly sure if that removes all the hassle factor, because of course we still need someone to come in and install the energy efficiency technology. And it's supposed to go some way to improving the workmanship, because there's a lot of people that want to invest in energy efficiency, and they cite that they're worried about the workmanship or the quality of the product. Cowboys coming in and not doing a very good job, and so people are scared off because of that. So the Green Deal offers a system, a structure, where people are assessed correctly, they get rated, and so it's supposed to alleviate this workmanship barrier. There are a number of rules that go along with the Green Deal as well. Firstly, the golden rule, I've talked about that. It needs to be an accredited assessment of the house, so using the government's specified software tool. You can only implement measures that are being prior approved. There's about 45 different measures and technologies at the moment that are accepted. For the non-domestic sector, the list is a little bit larger than the domestic sector. It needs to be installed by an accredited installer, so you can't have cowboys coming along just trying to install things that they need to have a properly qualified, and government programs are now being set up to approve both installers and assessors to do this work. It needs to abide with the Consumer Credit Act, because of course it's a loan that's happening. And of course there needs to be consent from the person that pays the bill. There's a big question mark over whether the person that pays the bill today might want to take out the Green Deal and they only live in the property for 2 years and then they need to sell the property later on. And so the question then is, will this inhibit the house from being sold if a Green Deal is attached to the home, or will it make the house more, will it increase its value, or will people want to buy the house if it's got a Green Deal? And because there hasn't been any implemented yet, we don't know, and I've heard both sides of the argument come forward. In land economy, there's someone doing some research looking at the value of properties and how the value may increase once you put energy efficiency technologies in the home. And the argument here is that you reduce your costs through energy efficiency measures, but actually to convince the market, to convince people to invest in energy efficiency, we need to have real market signals and convince landlords that the value of the property is going to increase when they do so. So we're looking for some evidence to show that that's the case.
Is it on the Green Deal where you're not allowed to rent a substandard property as of 2016?
Maybe.
There was a really nasty stick in the tail of one of the recent, maybe it's the Irish Act, no, I think it's the Green Deal, where you're not allowed to rent privately an EPC F4G property.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think that's the Green Deal.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
Listening, so you've got a few years to do it yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
But
that's
then,
right.
by the way, in 5 years' time, you ain't going to be able to rent that to anybody legally, and you have to pay for it yourself. So
Yeah.
look at the Green Deal now.
Yeah.
They're really going for
Yeah.
the slumlords.
Yeah.
With the
But then again, this is just the rented sector, so by far the majority, I can't remember the exact amount, but 60, 70% of the market is still, maybe it's 60%, I think 10 or 15% is social. So actual land owner-occupiers are a big part of the market here. And of course, throughout the whole process, there needs to be proper disclosure of what people are getting into when they sign up to Green Deal. So just to quickly go through, is there a laser on this today? So we've got the three players in the market here. We have the energy supplier, so this is your energy company. We have the consumer, and we have the Green Deal participant, so this is the Green Deal provider or the assessor. So to start with, we have the consumer. They request an assessment from the market, or maybe the market approaches them. Maybe someone comes to your door, calls you up, says, are you aware that you could save lots of money by installing energy efficiency technologies? An advisor then carries out an assessment, so they'll come in with their software tool, look at the energy efficiency of the building, and then this will get passed on to the Green Deal provider, who essentially packages this up and says, this is how much it's going to cost, and in this situation it needs to meet the golden rule, so it needs to abide by both the assessment and the financial package cost of the energy efficiency technologies. The consumer then gets the option, they can agree to the measures that are being provided by the Green Deal provider, or if they don't, then they can select another provider. If they do agree, do they adopt the Green Deal plan? Again, they have the option of saying no. They say yes. The consumer obtains the permission and signs up to the Green Deal plan and the proposed work that's going to happen in the house.
You mean planning permissions, that sort of thing? Is that what you
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. So permissions from and making sure that all the rules are fulfilled, the consumer credit act, etc. And then we have the accredited installer then comes into the house, installs the measures. The Green Deal provider then tells the energy company that the Green Deal has been taken out on the property and that the charge is going to need to be charged to their energy bills. So the energy provider, so British Gas or EDF, etc., will then add this to the bill through the amount that's told through the Green Deal provider, and then they will bill the consumer through the credit bill not only for their energy but also for paying back the energy efficiency measures. This then gets paid to the energy company, who then, the energy company then provides the Green Deal payment. So it's a bit of a convoluted process, but that's how the system works, supposedly. We'll see how it does in practice. At the start, when the Green Deal was first being talked about, a lot of energy companies were thinking of becoming Green Deal providers themselves because they saw a route to market. They didn't need to deal with the middlemen, but actually what's happened now is they've recognised that this isn't part of their core business and they're probably better off leaving this to other participants in the market. Are there any questions about that process?
Just a little point. I mean,
Yeah.
the consumer doesn't have to take up the Green Deal loan, and there are some other companies, in particular mortgage companies, that are starting to offer alternative financing, which is a lot better than 7 to 8%.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the 7 to 8% is because it's effectively a personal unsecured loan.
Yes.
And if you've got, if you want to put something on your mortgage, you can get it much cheaper.
Yeah. So once you've got the assessment, it's up to you what you do with it. You can go out and source your own loan, ask your parents for a loan. Like I said before, there are 45 different technologies. I'm not going to go through them all, but it's suffice to say that microgeneration is covered. There is some interesting interplay between the feed-in tariffs and the renewable heating incentive, which I won't go into because it's the detail there that matters. But also the non-domestic sector, there's several things well, 3 categories which are included in the non-domestic sector of the Green Deal and not in the domestic sector. So we have lighting, interestingly, isn't covered under the domestic Green Deal. Mechanical ventilation, probably because it's not cost effective to put mechanical ventilation into the domestic sector, and if it is, then for some reason they don't want to fund it. And then heat recovery, because they're more large scale type thing. So I've talked a lot about the Green Deal, but not much about the energy company obligation. So the energy company obligation replaces the carbon emissions reduction target and the community energy saving program, both policies targeted at fuel poor, low income households. And now that warm front is starting to come to an end, there's talk about it replacing that as well. It is supposed to provide support when the golden rule is not met, because within the Green Deal there are different types of people that will miss out, and that's either people that are fuel poor or people with measures that are difficult to meet. So there's 3 basic measures to the energy company obligation. These are, by the way, requirements on energy companies to provide these installations in people's homes. So we have the affordable warmth obligation. This is means tested, so it's only for low income or vulnerable households, and it covers heating, insulation to improve the standard and quality of the house. There's a carbon saving obligation, and this is non-means tested, so this can be for anyone, but it's only to make difficult insulation measures more effective. So they're being very specific there. It's just for insulation, it's not for microgeneration technologies, and it could cover situations where the golden rule isn't being met for more expensive external insulation, etc. for homes. And I think the businesses that I was talking to, I think saw this as a real opportunity for them to make some, to do something with the Green Deal in collaboration with the energy companies. And then of course there's the carbon communities obligation, which is similar to the affordable warmth obligation, but it's done at the community level. So, and it's aimed at the 15 most deprived areas. So if you live in a building which may be very efficient or maybe very expensive, and you don't get qualified under the means tested program, but because you live in a deprived area, you will be covered under that. And I think this is supposed to encourage more community level options as well, like energy generation technology. So who is it that benefits? So we have the major energy companies within the market, and we have 23.1 million dwellings in the market that we need to do something about. But the energy company obligation only really focuses on either the fuel poor or the homes that are hard to treat. And although at this stage we're not sure how big these tails are going to be through this measure and how much the government is going to require energy companies to invest in homes, I think it's suffice to say that there's going to be a big chunk of people, a big chunk of houses that aren't covered by this. And then the question becomes, it needs to be politically feasible, because I think if the majority here think that they're paying too much for these companies to insulate and make other houses more energy efficient, especially homes that may be coming from relatively wealthy people, but they're hard to treat, then the rest of the public might not agree to that system. So there needs to be a bit of a balance here to how much investment these energy companies are required to do. So there's a lot of problems with the Green Deal, like I've started to talk about. The first one, I think, and the most important, is the model accuracy of estimating the energy company, because the Green Deal rests on estimating the energy consumption from each building. This is some data that I pulled from 2005 English House Condition Survey, where the SAP, where I had both the SAP, the government tool for looking at the standard assessment procedures for different dwellings, and the actual energy cost. And as you can see, they don't really match up. The SAP, the predicted energy, and the actual energy consumed are vastly different. There is a slight trend here, but the confidence interval is huge, and you could argue that the reason this comes down to behavioural effects, but I think actually there's a lot more going on than just differences in behaviour and demographics. I think that there are some underlying problems with the present suite of modelling tools that need to be looked at. I produced a paper which tracked the development of the modelling tools being used in the UK since they were first conceived over time until recently, and I found out that the SAP is based on a set of houses, about 70 or so, within the same area of England from about 1970, and has never been tested or validated against a statistically significant sample within the UK or across a very wide geographic area. So I think the first thing that they need to do, and all the equations that are in SAP are based on these 70 or so homes. I think what needs to happen is some more validation, some better equations of actual energy consumption being consumed in homes, and we might get some better estimates of how energy is being consumed.
Do you think that's, do you think there's a technical, SAP is purely technical?
Yeah.
Plugging the numbers and outcomes that thing.
Yeah. So it doesn't take into account behaviour or even environmental conditions.
Do you think you really need to look at more properties? Because that's only going to improve your technical. You can improve your technical accuracy, but really it needs the behavioural element is going dominant in that. The error, there's some error. The technical, the physics error in example is much smaller than the human element that's missing from it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that behaviour is the reason why there's some of this variance here. But I think that there is some serious things wrong with the equations that are in SAP that need to be looked at. What was the second part of your question?
No, it was. Do you think there is a problem with equations, or is that entirely technical?
I think there is. I think there is some underlying flaws with the equations. Yes. One example is thermal mass. Thermal mass just isn't treated very well at all, and it kind of. I mean, I've got an engineering background, so I do heat balance equations. In my model, what I did was I put a control volume around the house, and I said all the energy going in must equal the energy going out. In SAP, the thermal mass, they just create energy. It's kind of like it just comes from nowhere. It's amazing. It just, oh, there's this much thermal mass, therefore there must be this much energy. It's like, well, actually, that energy needs to come from somewhere, and they don't take into account the radiative forcing of sunlight. So you've got radiation energy coming through windows, of course, and you get the greenhouse effect heating the place up. But you've also got radiative forcing on the outside, on the opaque surfaces, which have an effect too, and that's not even considered, and that heats up the thermal mass of the building, and then that needs, so there's
some fairly substantial oversights.
Right.
And it's very simplistic on its hot water analysis as well. It's
Yeah.
really, really simplistic.
Yeah.
I have a question about the purpose of SAP. I'm more familiar with the non-domestic SAP. I thought SAP was a compliance tool more than it's more meant to measure performance compared to a notional building,
That's
to measure
right.
if it complies, not to predict the actual energy use.
Right, but in the Green Deal, they're using a version of SAP to estimate energy consumption, which is then being used in the Green Deal. So
That seems just completely wrong. on its
exactly,
face.
I agree.
But what about the occupancy assessment? Isn't that supposed to deal with that?
But it's not just about occupancy.
Well, yeah, but that I mean,
That's what they're saying, that they're going to put occupancy in, it's all going to be good, but actually I think there's more problems than just about occupancy. Yeah.
but they are trying to take into account the behavioural aspects and recalculate the savings based on your occupancy on your actual occupancy behaviour. But that doesn't mean that the technical problems are fixed, because of course they're not. With all things you mentioned.
There's tools like that TN22 or 23, I can't remember which one it is, but the spreadsheet where you input all the actual, you count the bulbs and stuff, they use it for assessing the actual energy in use. That seems far more suited to this. I mean, people always, I used to do a lot of the Part-L models, and they always ask, why doesn't the model look like the actual use?
Yeah.
It's because it wasn't supposed to. It was supposed to be compared to those NCM profiles.
You're right, it compares it to the notional building, but that's how it was originally developed, but now it's moving into this predictive type model. Yeah. So what I used was I got SAP equations, and I took 3 dwellings, and I said, okay, let's have a look. These dwellings all consume 10.64, so they're identical dwellings. All the efficiency within the dwelling is exactly the same, but what we're doing is we're using a different fuel to heat that dwelling, or the energy consumption of that dwelling is used by different fuels. So I've got these different fuels here: coal, natural gas, wood, community waste, biodiesel from any source of electricity. And these are all fuels which are in SAP, and then based on that it gives you a SAP rating. The SAP value is up here. So what actually came out was that if you use a different fuel in your home for each of these identical dwellings, then you're going to get a very different SAP rate coming out. So what this says is that SAP isn't actually a measure of, a lot of people think it's measuring energy efficiency, but actually it's measuring the cost effectiveness or the cost efficiency of heating that home, because electricity is the most expensive fuel, so that means it's getting a much lower SAP value. And I think it gets quite worrying when you can see here that coal, because it's a cheap fuel, actually has a much higher SAP rate than potentially electricity, which could be powered through renewable sources. So I think there's some underlying things to do with how fuel is identified within SAP that needs to be looked at as well. And the higher the energy consumption of the dwelling, the more different fuel types matter. There's also this trade-off between, well, I guess it's kind of the rebound effect. Do you want to have warmer homes or lower carbon? The government at the moment is trying to aim for about a 75-25 split. So 75% of the reductions coming through carbon emissions, 25% through increased warmth. I think actually this is a bit idealistic, because across the entire building stock, that split is going to be very different, because we know that poorer households, the rebound effect is going to be a lot higher, and if you put in energy efficiency measures, then those houses are going to likely keep spending the same amount, but they're going to want to live in warmer homes rather than, say, carbon. So they're actually consuming or emitting the same amount of carbon. This is some research completed by a colleague of mine at University of Oxford, Dr. Nick Eyre, and he looked at the amount of CO2 that could be saved using the Green Deal. So those who are familiar with the CERT and CESP, he looked at the lifetime savings per annum between 2008 and 2012, and identified that it would save around 70 million tonnes, and then looked at the Green Deal and the energy company obligation, which is supposed to be replacing CERT and SET, and he estimated that it was a quarter of what we were saving under these previous government initiatives, which is quite concerning, all about the same amount as between 2005 and 2008. He identifies in this article that these are very difficult things to measure, but he says that the government really needs to think about how they're going to meet the carbon reductions targets, given that this is what he's predicting this measure is going to meet.
Is that because he estimates very low take-up of the Green Deal?
He probably does, because there's no financial, it's cost neutral, and so it's just relying on people going out there investing in it based on market principles. Although there is investment through the energy company obligation, but as you can see here, there's massive reduction even in energy company obligation compared to certain SES, which the energy company obligation is replacing.
Is the ECO, to cut the targets for the companies off ECO, is that money invested or is that carbon saved? Do you know? Because under SAS bit,
I'm not sure.
it was carbon saved, which means that obviously they're going to try and fund the cheaper options.
Yeah, I would be surprised if it was money invested. It must be carbon saved, but I'm not sure.
The trouble is, if you go for carbon saved, then no one's going to want to do grants for something more international because it's so expensive.
Mm.
What's the problem with
Well, you know, it depends if your goal is relieving fuel poverty or taking carbon type thing, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah, so I think I don't completely believe this result, but I also think that it might have potential to get up there, but I think it's probably somewhere in that range somewhere, and we'll see where it goes. But I think the government will end up having to put some money forward, either through lowering the interest rates and paying the difference, or putting regulations in place like you talked about, where you can't rent homes for the different standards.
There was, I forget the reference, I'll find it if you like. I believe it's 2016.
It is 2016, and I thought it was D rather than E, but yeah.
I have heard of something similar, I don't know the details.
All of the slums will become unrentable unless you do something about it.
Mm.
So,
Unless it's in the conservation area listed building, in which case they can't put the green measures in, so there'll be exceptions.
yeah, the tenants have a choice though.
Yeah.
I just realised I'm totally running out of time, but
I was going to
okay.
I'm not sure where you go.
A couple of slides.
Okay.
Is that okay? I'll just quickly go through the costs because I think this is interesting. So I took the government cost-benefit analysis tools online and looked at feed-in tariffs, renewable heat incentives, and renewable obligations, and looked at how much it was supposed to, the lifetime was going to cost society. So the Green Deal estimated that there was going to be a net saving based on the energy efficiency technologies being put forward, but of course all those other mechanisms are going to cost money. We look at the carbon savings that were predicted. The renewable heat incentive came out quite well. The best was the renewables obligation, but again the Green Deal only was estimating 5 million tonnes CO2 savings.
But are we losing the renewables obligation? Is going where we get this contract for difference business?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. I'm not sure if that's been confirmed yet, but there is talk of that. And the costs quickly. Because the Green Deal is cost neutral, it doesn't cost anything, whereas these other mechanisms do cost money. And if we look at the pounds per tonne saved, then we're looking, this is off the average electricity bill, and what I've done is looked at year 1 and year 30, assumed a 5% per annum increase in energy costs and a 1.5% per annum increase in the number of dwellings. And this is the cost on your energy bill that is supposed to fund these different measures. So you can see here, financially the Green Deal doesn't make sense, but whether you're able to get the penetration and implementation by not spending any money is another question. So just quickly, these are what I consider the concerns about why the Green Deal might not work. First, we've got quality control, quality of the products, the energy efficiency measures going in, the quality of the workmanship. We have supply chain availability, chicken or egg problem here. We need the supply chains to make sure that we can ramp up to the level of implementation required, but then if you don't have the demand, then you can't get the supply chain. So maybe we need something to kickstart the supply chain process. access to skilled labour. It's estimated that more than 65,000 new jobs will be required. It takes a lot of time to train people up. It costs a lot of money, and this is going to need to compete within a market where we have a demand for new housing and you know, a number of other jobs in the market which perhaps the skilled labour might not meet the level required. And I talked a bit about before the level of the retrofit that we're going to need to meet the targets. And the Green Deal at the moment I don't think is going to deliver the deep retrofit required, and I think it's only going to deliver the easy, cost beneficial retrofits which won't meet the targets. So just quickly, many barriers remain. The financial incentives aren't probably sufficient. We look at CERT, even when they were subsidised by 50 or 100%, people were still not taking them up. And this is people actually, the government paying for these implementations to be put in the house. So if the government's not paying for the Green Deal, then why are people going to implement it? We get the law of decreasing marginal returns. Each new energy efficiency technology installed in the home is going to be more expensive than the last, and so we need to think about how we're going to start funding those measures. I talked a bit about before the Green Deal was excluded from funding the very high cost measures just because of the cost effectiveness of it. And although the energy company obligation does fund high cost measures through energy companies, there's some political sensitivity here about whether the public is going to agree to that level. And then I think a positive way forward for the future will be to link the value of the property to the energy efficiency studies being put forward. So if there's a market for homes that are more energy efficient, that puts a premium on energy efficient homes, then we might be able to see the market recognising the benefit of energy efficiency and then actually investing in energy efficiency technologies. So just to end, this is a quote from a guy called George Box, and which I totally agree with. All models are wrong, but some are useful. And I think that actually it also works in policies as well, because at the end of the day, you can't get it right all the time, but at least something is better than nothing. Thank you.